Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Jodo Jake. Welcome back to the channel and happy Ascended Heroes release week. Kind of. We get one SKU, everything else doesn't come out until February 20th. Very odd release. In today's video, we're going to talk about every single illustration rare in Ascended Heroes. And what makes it so cool is that every single illustration rare is done by a different artist in the TCG. Now, some of these artists have been around for quite some time and some are making their debut. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Erika's Tangela. Now, I'm a big fan of this illustration. I'm also just a big fan of Tangela. I think Tangela is underrated and I'm really excited about that Tang growth that we're getting in Pokopia. I really love the style that they're going with that game. But anyways, I'm a big fan of this illustration. It's done by Bucci. Bucci has also done this Among Us from Black Bolt. Really a big fan of these different fungus Pokemon and mushroom Pokemon. The Among Us from this set is also really good. I've talked about it in a past video. Now, something really cool about this Erika's Tangela is that it would pair really nicely with the Erika's Invitation from 151, that special illustration rare trainer. I think they would look really nice in a binder. Beautifly, I'm a big fan of this card. I'm also just a big fan of Moriyu, the illustrator. A lot of their tones are muted and they pull a lot of color into the Pokemon to bring attention and focus to that mid-ground where the Pokemon usually exist. Now, Moriyu likes to play with the foreground, mid-ground, and background to define, you know, those different layers. And I think that's really good to do in terms of like creating an environment that feels real. You can see that here in their past work with the Clamperl from Deaths and Rivals. And in my opinion, this is the most underrated illustration rare from Deaths and Rivals. You know, it's Clamperl. It's not like the world's best Pokemon. It's not the most popular Pokemon. And I've talked about it in the past when illustrators are able to take a not so popular Pokemon and bring it to life in a way that is exciting. And I think that this Deaths and Rivals Clamperl is exactly that. Here's another example of them using their foreground, midground, and the background. You know, that foreground, we have all of the different coral, and then we have Clamperl in that midground. And in the background, we have all these layers that funnel up to the surface of the ocean. I think that this illustration is beautiful and I'm a big fan of the Beautifly. I'm excited to see this card in person. You know, it's always better when you have these cards in hand. Digital images are great, but the holding it in your hand, you can really see the detail. Next up, we have Dustox. Now, I'm a big fan of this artist as well. I believe that Dustox isn't the most popular Pokemon. Here we go again. But I will say that the way that Itakasaki uses muted tones, almost like a desaturated environment to bring a focus to the Pokemon with really bright colors. Some of their past work really focuses on Pokemon that are almost neon vibrant. This is an example of that. I love how the moon is just a singular white dot. There's something really cool about that. A lot of their work looks like screen prints. You can see that here in their past work. I've talked about this card as well. This is the Spiritomb from Mega Evolutions. You know, like I said, the background stays super muted and moody. And then the subject, like Spiritomb, gets this really loud accent of color. And it's funny because both of these cards are just purples and greens, but they're very neon-like. They're very bright. The way that the rest of the environment of the card is really desaturated, it really brings your focus to the Pokemon itself. Here we have Budew. This is technically a reprint, but of course it's a new illustration by Yoko Hashida. Now, Yoko Hashida's work is really driven by gradients. They love to use color transitionally, and you'll see a similar color palette across the two cards that we're going to show. Here we have the Budew with these yellows, greens and teals and blues, and they love to use patterns and, you know, all of these different paths to guide you towards the center of the card, which is where the Pokemon typically exist in their work. And you'll see that here with the Vanillish from White Flare, similar color palette. You'll see that it's got this snow forming around, and this is very intentional in terms of how this snow is kind of curving around the card. It's using the golden ratio, so your eye is kind of drawn into this circular motion into the center where you see the Vanillish, and I just love that detail. I think this is a great card, and I'm really excited about having this Budew in the binder. Ethan's Magcargo. Now, I absolutely love this card. I think it's beautiful. I love the story-driven element that is, you know, happening here, not only in this card, but in another card that we'll get to in just a moment. This is illustrated by Hideki Ishikawa, And I love that it's a partner Pokemon. We need more partner Pokemon in 2026. Journey Together, Destined Rivals, it wasn't enough. We need more of that. So I'm very excited to see that happening in this new set. What makes this card so cool is that we received a Ethan's Adventure in Destined Rivals. Although these are illustrated by completely different artists, they tell a story here. In the Ethan's Adventure, we see Ethan with Pichu and Cyndaquil and Slugma roaming through the forest on their way to become the next best trainer. And if we look at the Ethan's Magcargo, we can see Ethan and Magcargo standing on Mount Silver, looking back at everything that they have accomplished. And I love that there's these warm tones from the sunrise. It looks like they've been on this journey for quite some time and they're taking a moment to take it all in. And I love that. Any card that tells a story like this is a must-have. Hideki Ishikawa also illustrated the Giovanni's Charisma Special Illustration Rare from 151. Probably the most undervalued, underappreciated Special Illustration Rare trainer from all of Scarlet and Violet. I love the story-driven elements here. You can look at Giovanni hanging out with Persian. There's also a Persian illustration rare done by another artist that we'll get to in a moment. But this is a fantastic card. It's how I imagine Giovanni living. He's just sitting there holding Pokeballs at the top of Silphco in his penthouse. Beautiful illustration. I'm very excited about this Ethan's Magcargo, and I can't wait to get this card in a PSA 10. Here we have Numel, and this has to be one of the best Numel illustrations of all time in the TCG. This is illustrated by Yoshimi Miyashi. It's very adorable. It's very stressful. I love how cute this card is, and it reminds me a lot of Land Before Time. If you're a 90s kid like me, you definitely have seen that movie more than once. And Yoshimi Miyashi also illustrated the Rotom EX from Phantasmal Flames. Very different styles. You can see the similarities, but one is very much so a story-driven illustration rare. And this special illustration rare of Rotom is pretty flat, in my opinion. And it doesn't say a lot other than just show off a few of the different types of Rotoms. But nonetheless, this Numel is fantastic. I love the little smoke that's coming from Numel's back, and it kind of is signifying the volcano that we see in the background. Great illustration rare. It reminds me a lot of the Magby as well from Paradox Rift. Another great illustration rare. Next up, Salazzle. Now, this is illustrated by Daisuke, and what makes this card so great is the fact that it has the entire evolution line. We have a bunch of Salandits at the base of the card, kind of climbing up, chasing after Salazzle. Daisuke does this great job of having a lot of neutral colors with a very vibrant secondary color to bring attention to different parts of the card. You can see that the Salandits at the bottom have this like very vibrant lavender eye color, and then the Salazzle obviously has all those pink details that brings attention to those parts of the card. Daisuke also illustrated the Poniard from Black Bolt, and I love this card. It has Poniard sharpening its blade on these rocks, and it looks so proud of itself. It's a great illustration rare. And here we have Scorbunny. Now, Scorbunny is illustrated by Yu Nishida. What makes Nishida so great is the way that they pull their color palettes from the Pokemon to create the environment around them. Yu Nishida loves to use forest environments, and we'll see that in the other example, but they love those fall colors, pastel tones, and using leaves and forests to make up their environments. And we can see that here with the White Flare Special Illustration Rare Keldeo EX, one of my favorite cards from White Flare. And this is another great example of Yu Nishida bringing the environment to life through the color palette of the Pokemon. Keldeo's oranges and creams to create those fall tones, those oranges, those deep reds, as well as Keldeo's tail and that blue accent on its head to create, you know, those different tones and palettes of the water that's going through the forest. Really love this card, and I'm excited to add this Scorbunny to my illustration rare binder. Here we have Psyduck, which is probably one of the most anticipated illustration rares from Ascended Heroes. It is one of my favorite illustration rares of all time. If you're not familiar with Rend, I've talked about them before. They are the illustration contest winner from 2022. They've done cards like Wigglytuff, Furret, and so forth. They are one of the most impressive artists that deeply understand lighting and reflection. You know, the highlights always follow the geometry with their cards, and their bounce light is always believable. And every surface reads as material it's supposed to be. This is a great example of that. The reflection of the water, the detail on the clouds, just the different lighting that's happening underwater is just phenomenal. And I'm so excited to have this card not only in the binder, but graded in a PSA 10. Let me know what you guys think of Psyduck in the comments. Is this one of your favorite illustration rares from Ascended Heroes? If not, which one is? Ren also did this Wigglytuff illustration rare from Phantasmal Flames, and this is another great example of them having a deep understanding of reflection. If you look closely at the Wigglytuff eyes, you can see the reflection of the stadium that they're singing in, and I think that it's just an incredible detail that most may miss. And it's one of those things you have to look at the card in person to really get a good impression of it. Here we have Snorunt. Now, this is illustrated by June, who is a brand new up-and-coming artist to the Pokemon TCG. Snorunt is actually their very first illustration rare in the physical TCG, but it isn't their first Pokemon card, if you catch what I'm saying. Now, they did illustrate the Quillfish from Pokemon Pocket, which is a fantastic illustration rare. I'm so sad that we have so many incredible illustrations in Pocket that may never get a physical print. I swear, Pokemon, start printing these. They also illustrated the Cascoon in Ascended Heroes, which is just another common in the set. This is actually their only 2 physical cards, so they are a very brand new artist. I love how this artist reminds me a lot of Akira Sake. It's almost inverted, whereas Akira Sake's backgrounds are usually darker and muted. These are more light and muted with a more saturated Pokemon, but still has this muted tone to it. I'm excited to see what they do in the TCG, especially after seeing that Quillfish from Pocket. Weavile. Now, Weavile is one of my favorite illustration rares from Ascended Heroes. It is illustrated by Yunonori. Yunonori is a talented, story-driven artist. They care just as much about the environment of the Pokemon as they do the personality and emotion of the Pokemon in every illustration. I love that it's like this gang of Weaviles in this alley in the snow, and they're coming at you, right? As if they're about to jump you. Unfortunately, you can see all the claw marks in the snow, and they're slowly kind of stepping towards you. I love how the main Weavile is lit very nicely and, front and center, whereas the rest of them are kind of silhouetted and you can kind of only see their eyes in the background. I love this illustrator. I think they do a great job every time that they illustrate something in the TCG. And another great example of that is the Meowth from Phantasmal Flames. Now, I'm so glad this came to English. This was, for the longest time, rumored to be a Japanese exclusive. Luckily, this and the Paldean Wooper came to Phantasmal Flames. I'm a big fan of this card for many reasons, but most importantly, the nostalgia aspect. If you didn't know, or if you didn't play Pokemon Red and Blue, when you're heading to Cerulean City to battle Misty, there's a house and a Pokemart side by side with one another. And if you look in the background of the Meowth illustration rare, we have that same house and that same Pokemart side by side. And I love that you are being pulled back into Kanto in this immersive illustration rare by Yunonori. And this is what I mean when Yunonori cares deeply about the immersiveness and the world building elements to their illustrations for the Pokemon TCG. This is such a great card. I have a few in the binder as well as 1 or 2 off at PSA. Truly excited to have this card in the collection. And I'm very excited about adding this Weavile as well. Heliolisk, illustrated by Takeshi Nakamura. I'm a big fan of this card solely because of the visual metaphor that's happening. If we look closely in the bottom left, we can see a satellite in the shadow. And then in the back left, on top of the house, we see 2 more satellites. And then we see Heliolisk with its head open. Looks a lot like a sun, and it's absorbing sunlight like a solar panel. And I love that the artist is designing the Pokemon so it echoes something from the environment, which makes the scene feel clever and cohesive. And this is just a great example of that. If you're not familiar with Takeshi Nakamura, they illustrated Volcarona's Paradox forms and Paradox Rift. They illustrated the ancient form, which was Slitherwing, as well as the future form, which was the Iron Moth. Personally, I like the Slitherwing a lot more. I think the Iron Pokemon are a little lazy. I was a little disappointed with most of the Iron Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. Let me know in the comments. Did you guys like the ancient Pokemon more or the future Pokemon? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Here we have Vikavolt, illustrated by Tanjini Matsuno. And this illustrator loves to make Pokemon look massive. They take up a lot of the space of the card. And I love this Vikavolt. It's almost like it's skydiving at you, ready to use this charge attack. If we look at their past work, we can see how they definitely represent Pokemon in this massive, intense way. and they're always kind of coming at you at the camera lens. And this Steelix here from Phantasmal Flames is a great example of that. I'm a big fan of this card. I'm a big fan of Steelix overall. I recently talked about Ren's illustration contest Scizor, where you can see Steelix in the reflection. Make sure to go check out that video. But I'm very excited to see that they've added this Vikavolt to Ascended Heroes, and I'm excited to see what they do in 2026 and beyond. Iono's Wattrel, illustrated by Mingo. Now, if I could sum up Mingo's art style in one word, it would be electric. Something that's very consistent across all of their cards is this fluorescent color scheme. But what makes this specific card so unique is the combination of these three-dimensional elements and this flat comic book style design. If we look in the background, we can see like these three-dimensional elements like a star, a Pokeball, as well as a heart, and all these swirly, different, really abstract patterns, as well as like those comic book shading patterns, dotted patterns. And then we have the Wattrel and Iono, which are very flat and comic book-like. More specifically, Iono herself is very flat. This comic book style is very thematic to Ascended Heroes overall. We see it with all of the Mega Attack cards, as well as just the name itself. It's very hero comic book themed, which is very fitting for this set. One unique thing about this card is that this was rumored to be exclusive to Japan, but luckily enough, it's another card that we see in English, and I'm very excited to add it to the collection. If we take a look at Mingo's past work, we can look at the Sigilif from White Flare. It's one of my favorite illustration rares by Mingo, and I really love this color palette. It reminds me a lot of like, you know, Aztec colors, and it's very fitting for this Pokemon. I also love how the eye is focused on this pink sun in the sky, and you're looking up. This is a very unique point of view as far as illustrations go in the TCG, and I think that this is extremely well done. Very excited about what this artist is bringing to the table as far as like this high chroma neon palette. And I'm very excited about Mingo's style and leaning hard into this high chroma neon palette across all of their illustrations. And I'm excited to see what they do next. I'd love to see them do like a Natu or a Xatu in the future. I think that this artist would do a great job with those Pokemon. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Here we have Marill, illustrated by Rond. Now, I'm a big fan of this artist. I didn't realize that this artist had done a few of the other cards that I'm a big fan of that I'll show you in a moment, but their style is very dreamy, and I love how their backgrounds are a little abstract, but not too abstract. They kind of help tell the story of the Pokemon that they're illustrating. I love Marill, so this is a must-have for my collection. If we take a look at their past cards, they've done the Ceruledge from Surging Sparks, as well as the Rapidash from Destined Rivals, and both of these cards are insane. I love the fantasy style of the Ceruledge. It's very medieval and dark, as well as this Rapidash that's very light and vibrant. They have a deep understanding of color theory and the way that they can complement these colors with their backgrounds. The dark oranges of the background of the Ceruledge really help complement those pinks and blues coming from Ceruledge's head, those flames, as well as the swords. It's a beautiful illustration. And this Rapidash up and close, kind of running through this floral forest. It feels very majestic, as a unicorn should. I've never been like the biggest fan of Rapidash, but I have multiple copies of this card because of just how beautiful it is. And I'm really excited about this Marill. Definitely going to be grading a few and putting a few in the binder. Here we have Misdreavus. When I played Silver and Gold as a kid, Misdreavus was always just one of those Pokemon that felt like it was a legendary. It kind of reminded me of Celebi a little bit. I don't know, was that just me? Let me know if Misdreavus felt like a pseudo-legendary to you in the comments. Now, Misdreavus is illustrated by Mashu, who's a fairly new artist to the TCG. They have done some cards recently that I'm sure you're familiar with that we'll talk about. I really love their style and the way that they have all these like abstract elements floating. Misdreavus is front and center coming at you. It feels like you just walked into some sort of dream. I really love seeing Misdreavus getting some more love in the TCG. I was a big fan of the Neo Revelation Misdreavus back in the day. I can't wait to add this card to the collection. And now that we have this, we have the Mismagius to go along with it as far as illustration rares go. So excited to finally add this Johto Pokemon to the binder. Now, if you weren't aware, Mashu illustrated the entire evolution line of Bulbasaur, Ivysaur, and Mega Venusaur from Mega Evolution's base back in September. And I'm a big fan of these cards, specifically the Bulbasaur. There's just something so sweet and majestic about Bulbasaur jumping through the sky. It almost reminds me of like Michael Jordan jumping. I think that these cards are great. They look far better in person. And I love that dark black background with all these vibrant neon colors. You don't see that a lot, and this is just really well done. I'm really hopeful that we get this sort of treatment for Blastoise, Wartortle, and Squirtle at some point. Whether it's from this artist or another artist, I just really want to see that evolution line get this love. Come on, Mega Blastoise. Banette, illustrated by Yoshiro Nanako. Now, Nanako's style is very decorative with a bunch of different ornaments in the background. And what's really cool about this card is that there's a bunch of Pokemon ornaments. We see Solrock, we see Lunatone, and we see Marill, as well as a Wingull. Their style is very decorative, lots of different patterns and textures with a lot of different line strokes. And if you didn't know, Yoshiro Nanako illustrated the Umbreon EX from Prismatic Evolutions. Yes, the Sunbreon, the true crown king of Scarlet and Violet, the most expensive special illustration rare of all of Scarlet and Violet. And I will say that it is the best evolution from Prismatic Evolutions. I know that's probably a cold take because it's Umbreon, but Nanako's art style does a great job of creating all of these intricate details that make this card much more unique from the rest of the evolutions. No shade to the other artists that created those evolution arts. There's just something about this one specifically that stands out from the rest, and I think it's truly just Nanako's art style. This is a card that I need to add to the collection. It's probably at its lowest at this point, but it's just so expensive for a modern card. Let me know, what do you guys think about paying this much for a modern special illustration rare? To me, it's a little crazy, but let me know in the comments. Togekiss, illustrated by Satoma. I'm one of those people that think that Togekiss never should have happened. I think Togetic should have been the final evolution of Togepi. Let me know in the comments if you guys agree or disagree. I will say I do like this card a lot. I love this artist's color palettes. I love seeing Togekiss flying off from top of this house like it's an owl perched up on the rooftop. This artist also illustrated Cresselia and Dugong. Cresselia is from Shrouded Fable. I actually pulled this card back when Shrouded Fable came out, and at the time I had no idea this card existed, not even in Japanese. So when I pulled it, I was actually surprised, and I feel like that's so rare, and that experience doesn't happen as much as it should in this hobby. Things are leaked so early, and it's hard to avoid all of this new information that's constantly happening in the TCG. And this Dugong is one of my favorite illustration rares from Phantasmal Flames. I love the Aurora Lights. Satoma does a great job at making Pokemon feel majestic, making them feel legendary. And this Dugong actually feels very majestic and legendary. Definitely a card that I have in the binder, as well as a few at PSA currently grading. Fingers crossed those get 10s. Here we have Slurpuff, illustrated by Yoshimoto Yoshimon, who is a brand new artist that is debuting in Ascended Heroes. Their style is very monochrome dominant with a bit of spot color. You can see shades of red across this entire card, and then a few yellows and greens to give accent to this illustration. The other illustration that they've done in this set is the Marill, which is a common in the set. I'm a big fan of Marill, so they've won me over. Let me know what you guys think of this brand new artist in the comments. Here we have Hops Trevenant, illustrated by Tomowaka. Now, something that I really enjoy about this artist is that it reminds me of like early 2000s Saturday morning cartoons in terms of their style. They have all these bold outlines. I'm not the biggest Trevenant fan or Hop fan, but I'm a fan of this card. It's giving me Scooby-Doo vibes. This artist, Tomowaka, has illustrated the Darumaka from Black Bolt. They're very accustomed to using these bold black outlines across their cards. And something you'll see across all of their cards is just how vibrant their color palettes are. They're very cartoon themed. Excited to see what Tomowaka does next. And I'm very excited to add this Hops Trevenant to my illustration rare binder. Here we have Team Rocket's Mimikyu, illustrated by Gosan, one of the best story-driven artists in modern Pokemon. They really do a great job with their environments to help tell a story or set the stage of the life of a Pokemon. And this is another partner Pokemon. I'm a big fan of partner Pokemon, especially if they're Team Rocket Pokemon. Here we see Team Rocket Grunt in the background. It looks like they're in their secret lair. I just love this card. I love the lighting on Mimikyu. And if you're not familiar with Gosan, Gosan illustrated the Snorlax promo from 151. This came in our Elite Trainer box, as well as the Pokemon Center stamped one in the Pokemon Center Elite Trainer box. Now, I love that this illustration tells a story that we're oh so familiar with, especially if you played Red and Blue and you're an old Gen 1er like me. But this card is great because it has a few other Pokemon included in the illustration. We see Pidgey, who's standing on top of Snorlax, and then we see Diglett. And I swear, it's almost as if Diglett is feeling like we did as kids, walking up to Snorlax without the Pokeflute. Like, are you gonna move? How am I supposed to get around you? Just love this card, and I love how this is telling a story that is very nostalgic to us that played these games as kids. Here we have Team Rocket's Dugtrio, illustrated by Whisker. I'm a big fan of this illustration. This artist loves to do Team Rocket-esque Pokemon, and we'll get into that in a moment. I love how cinematic their cards are. It's very story-first framing. These don't feel like a Pokemon pose. They feel like a moment or a scene. And they do a great job of using that foreground, midground, and background in all of their cards to create layering, which feels really intentional. And I love this angled perspective. It's bold and diagonal for like tension and motion. And I love how Giovanni is just standing in the background, kind of waiting for Dugtrio to pop up, almost as if this is the Dugtrio that comes in our Team Rocket set 26 years ago. Here we have the Dark Dugtrio bursting into this house from underground. It's almost as if that's the same Dugtrio that we're seeing in Ascended Heroes. Let me know what you guys think of that concept. I think it's pretty fun to think about. If you're not familiar with Whisker, Whisker illustrated the Persian from Shrouded Fable, one of the best. I love the reflection that's happening in this card. Again, it's Pokemon that are in believable spaces, right? We see this Persian that's most likely sitting in the same penthouse suite in Silphco that we saw in that Giovanni's Charisma Special Illustration Rare from 151. I think those cards pair really nicely with one another. Whisker is a great artist, and this is probably my favorite, if not my second favorite from Shrouded Fable. I'd have to say it's a tie between this and the Houndoom. Nonetheless, I really love Whisker's style. Another truly great story-driven artist that really keeps me drawn to these illustrations in the modern TCG. Next up, we have Hitmontop by Osar. I love how toy-like their illustrations are. They have these bold, thick, crayon-style lines, and then their environments are typically without any sort of outline to help you focus on these Pokemon with these bold lines to kind of separate them from their environment. I love the colors of this card. I'm a fan of Hitmontop. It's another Johto Pokemon. I'm excited that we're finally getting a Hitmon illustration rare or special illustration rare. I am dying to see a Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan special illustration rare or illustration rare. If you're not familiar with Osar, they did the special illustration rare Durant EX from Surging Sparks. And something unique and really cool about this card is if you have multiple copies, it creates a pattern of ants marching like an army of ants. And I love that. It's very fourth wall breaking. We've seen cards that have connected arts, but I don't know how many cards we've seen have a repeatable pattern like this. Very unique and very clever of Osar to do. Here we have Medicham illustrated by Kichiro Ito. Love the visual representation of meditation via like the mandala geometry that we're seeing here. It has this psychedelic color palette using all of these concentric ring patterns. And it's a great way of representing this Pokemon and its theme of meditation. I think that this is really well done. And if you're unaware, Kichiro Ito illustrated the king of modern day Pokemon cards, the king of Sword and Shield. And yes, I'm talking about Umbreon VMAX from Evolving Skies. Ito killed it with this illustration. You know, most people consider this to be the modern day base set Charizard. And I have to agree, if I'm going to get an overall baseline pulse as far as how healthy the Pokemon market is performing, I'm going to look at two cards, and that is the base set Charizard from base set of 1999, and I'm going to look at the Umbreon VMAX from Evolving Skies of 2021. Beautiful illustration. Really excited to see what this card does over the next 5 years. I will say though, my favorite alt art from Evolving Skies is actually the Umbreon V. I think it does a better job of telling the story of Umbreon and it's more lore correct. That being said, this is a beautiful illustration of Umbreon reaching for the moon. Definitely happy to have this in a PSA 10. I had graded 2 or 3 of them. Glad that I kept one. Do you guys have the Umbreon VMAX? Are you looking to get this card in your collection? How do you feel about its current price? Let me know in the comments. Here we have Carbink illustrated by Sui. Now, there is no other artist like Sui in the TCG when it comes to the color glow treatment. We can see all these gemstones just glowing of color. And it's just a really beautiful way of illustrating. And you can see that across all of their cards. Now, here we have Sui's Mewtwo and Mew GX Tag Team Sun and Moon promo from 2019. And this is just another example of that glow treatment. We see in the background of this hill that they're sitting on has all of these like fireflies or glow in the dark flowers that are kind of pulsating this sense of glow. Even the two legendary Pokemon have this glowy feel to them. This is a great illustration. I used to have this, I graded it myself, and I sold all of my tag teams. The market just valued them more than I did. Here we have Mightyena, illustrated by Iono Kaiji, one of my favorite illustrations in all of Ascended Heroes. I really love how aggressive this card looks, and there's this sense of motion. This artist is a very talented monochromatic artist, and you can see that here with their Blood Moon Ursaluna that they did in Prismatic Evolutions. Another red driven card, very aggressive, very intense, super monochromatic. I love the way that they're able to use all these shapes to create layers. They do that across most of their illustrations. And this artist is very easy to identify just based off the color palettes and the style that they have. Truly a beautiful illustration rare that I'm excited to add to the binder. Cynthia's Spiritomb. Now, I absolutely love this illustration rare. This is illustrated by HNCL, also known as Hungry Clicker. You can count on Hungry Clicker to have this epic, up close and personal, in your face design that kind of grabs your attention. And this Spiritomb is just a great example of that. I love how Spiritomb's colors are reflecting onto Cynthia's face. It makes Cynthia that more menacing and dark. And I think that this is a great illustration rare. Probably my favorite physical TCG Spiritomb. My favorite illustration of Spiritomb has to go to Shinji Kanda from Pocket. If you haven't seen that card, it is insane. And if you're not familiar with Hungry Clicker, they illustrated the Lucario V-Star from Crown Zenith. This was the promo from the Elite Trainer box. I love this card. I have graded a ton of them. If you're not familiar with me, I sent off a ton to PSA and I got a lot of 10s. And I truly love this card because it reminds me of Dragon Ball Z. Lucario is looking like he's turning Super Saiyan. Galarian Obstagoon, illustrated by KRGC, also known as Koraguchi. You can count on Koraguchi to illustrate a Pokemon in this striking battle pose in every single one of their cards. I love the colors on this card. I love the desaturation of Galarian Obstagoon and how they're using these fluorescent pinks to really give this card a pop. And if you're not familiar with Koraguchi, they illustrated a very underrated illustration rare from Twilight Masquerade, and that is the Infernape. It's a beautiful example that demonstrates that action battle pose, and I think this card is extremely slept on. Mawile, illustrated by Cao Cao. I love Cao Cao's style. It's very storybook-like. Their illustrations feel like a single page from some sort of children's book. It's very gentle, cozy, and it's very narrative first. And if you're not familiar with Cao Cao, they contributed to the Van Gogh exhibit with these illustrations. They did the Eevee wearing the hat as well as the Snorlax sleeping on the bed. I'm a big fan of these illustrations. There's a Smeargle illustrated by Kamiya that was part of this exhibit, and it was a postcard. I believe a lot of these were postcards that you can get through the exhibit or through the Pokemon Center, and I truly need to get that Kamiya Smeargle. Smeargle is one of my favorite Pokemon. But yeah, these are some great illustrations by Cao Cao. Cao Cao also did the Gengar VMAX from Fusion Strike, one of the behemoths from Sword and Shield as far as alt arts go. It's actually a hard card to grade. Most of them were really off-center. And a really unique thing about this card that I think is fourth wall breaking that Cao Cao did is if you look closely in the mouth of the Gengar VMAX, the shape of the tonsils is very intentional. Now, this Gengar VMAX is a dark type Pokemon card, and what they did was they used the dark energy shape to shape the tonsil of the mouth of Gengar. Did you ever catch that? Let me know in the comments. Dreepy, illustrated by Jerky. Now, Jerky is a fan favorite for most people. I know a lot of people that collect Jerky. Shout out to BB if you're watching this. Now, Jerky has this really playful art style. And if you're not familiar with Jerky, Jerky illustrated the entire Pidgeot line from Obsidian Flames. I really love these cards and how they're telling a story of this Pidgey flying through different routes while they evolve. I think that was a really unique set that I don't think gets enough love. I think that this Pidgeot is incredibly undervalued and underappreciated because from a grading standpoint, it's incredibly hard to grade these special illustration rares from Obsidian Flames. Obsidian Flames just didn't have great great print quality, unfortunately. And to follow that, we have Dracloak, which was also illustrated by Jerky. And what's really cool is that, you know, we got Dreepy, we got Dracloak, but where is Dragapult? Well, we already got Dragapult. That was the Dragapult in Prismatic Evolutions, which was also illustrated by Jerky. So we have the entire evolution line now. I think that this set looks really nice with one another. I definitely want to have these in the binder, maybe even grade them all sequentially. What do you guys think of Jerky's art style? Let me know in the comments. Here we have Larry Staraptor, illustrated by Kantaro. I'm a big fan of this illustration. I love the lighting choices, and I love that this is very fitting for the Z to A games. It's, you know, taking place on a rooftop, which is very thematic for Legend Z to A. And I love the lighting, and Kantaro did a great job with this illustration. And Kantaro illustrated one of my favorite special illustration rares of Scarlet and Violet, and that is this here, Genesect. I've talked about it before, but it reminds me a lot of Terminator. It's like the old Alien movies. You're hiding in this small space while Genesect is on a warpath. You can see all the flames behind Genesect. This is a great illustration that tells a very dark story, and I'm a very big fan of story-driven illustrators. Fan Rotom, illustrated by Yukiro Tada. Now, I swear, Rotom has been getting a lot of love in the TCG over the last 4 or 5 years. We saw Rotom as an alt art in Lost Origin. We've gotten Rotom as illustration rares and special illustration rares in Scarlet and Violet. We recently just got the Rotom special illustration rare in Phantasmal Flames. There's someone at Pokemon that truly just loves Rotom. This artist also did the Executor from Mega Evolutions. I recently picked this up in a PSA 10 for 50 bucks, which seems very affordable. Their cards truly do look so good side by side. As you can see here, we have Pinsir, Alolan Dugtrio, Patrat, Executor, and the new Fan Rotom. And it's almost as if all of these Pokemon are living on the same island, and I love that. I think these would look great in a binder. All right, y'all, that's it for this list. Let me know in the comments what your favorite illustration rare is from Ascended Heroes and what you think will be the most slept on illustration rare from this set. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to follow me on Instagram and subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to see me do a video on the special illustration rares, please let me know in the comments. I truly enjoyed making this video, and I'm excited for this set. I know that the release schedule is a little bit odd, but you know, if you have patience, patience will pay off in this hobby. Don't go FOMO buying into this set. And until next time, happy collecting. Peace.